further debate? I recognize the member from London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It is a pleasure to rise tonight in this late-night debate about public education. It is an issue that has really guided my journey to this place. And I want to start by quoting Thames Valley District School Board trustee Marian Larson, who had this to say when Bill 101 was introduced by the government just a month or so ago. So Marianne Larson, who is also a former faculty member at the Western Faculty of Education and as I said, an elected Thames Valley District School Board trustee, said today, with the introduction of the Putting Student Achievement First Act, the Ford government is finishing the work started 30 years ago of destroying the foundation of our education system in Ontario, democratically elected school boards. And some of you in this place may recall the former Conservative government under Mike Harris in 1997 introducing legislation that forced a dramatic amalgamation of school boards across the province. In Thames Valley District School Board, there were actually 4 boards, 3 rural boards and 1 urban board for the City of London that came together to create this mega board, a very large amalgamated school board. That legislation in 1997 also saw very strong provincial control over school board as funding moved from local ratepayers to the province, which is as it should be. The province has a responsibility to fund public education, but the funding that is delivered to school boards has to be sufficient to support the educational needs of students. In 1997, we also saw with those big amalgamated boards much less local accountability. The school boards were much larger, and so that connection with the local communities that were represented within the school board was really lessened. And we also saw in 1997, with this big amalgamation, with the cut to trustee honorarium to $5,000, we also saw an immediate crackdown on getting interested people to run for the position of elected school board trustee in these new boards. And in the Thames Valley District School Board, the then chair of the board actually put out a media release asking Londoners who are committed to public education to consider putting their name forward to run as a school board trustee, because they were so worried in that first post-amalgamation election in 2000. They were so worried that nobody would want to run in this environment. Now, I was one of the people that did run in 2000 because I care deeply about public education, and I understand the important role of school board trustees in being that voice, not just for parents of kids in school, but a voice for the community. Because whether you have a child in school or not, you still have a vested interest in making sure that our public education is supporting students, is enabling all children to reach their full potential and to move forward with their lives. But to get back to Marianne Larson's comments at the introduction of the bill, she also says the legislation falsely claims that the problem in our education system lies with elected school boards, and in doing so deflects attention away from the chronic underfunding of public education in Ontario since this government came to power. And, a lot of people who've been following the progress of this bill agree completely with this perspective that was put forward by my friend Marianne Larson. This bill is a complete distraction from the real issues in our public education system. The fact that we have class sizes that are bursting at the seams. We have a chronic lack of mental health supports for students. We have kids with special education needs who are not getting the resources or the school staff that they need to be successful in the classroom. We have classrooms that are lacking the most basic supplies. But instead of dealing with these problems, instead of investing in our education budget, which this government had the opportunity to do in its budget last month. Instead of doing that, this government has brought in legislation that is all about further concentrating power, not just in the government, but directly in the hands of the Minister of Education. So this bill gives the minister increased power over schools, school boards. It gives the minister the ability to decide what books are going to be used in schools, what education resources are going to be used, how trustees can communicate with each other. It gives the minister power over grades and exams, school board budgets, board communications, as I said, land acquisition and other capital projects, trustee pay and expenses. It seriously reduces the powers of trustees and school boards in their ability to represent their communities, and instead it transfers power to an appointee of this government, a new chief executive officer, CEO, who has to have business or financial qualifications, not knowledge of our public education system, not expertise in pedagogy or the supports that students need to be successful in schools. And, you know, in the Thames Valley District School Board, we have learned a little bit about what happens when the government puts responsibility for students' education in the hands of appointees who know nothing about public education. Thames Valley is one of the 8 school boards currently under supervision and at significant cost to the public, I may add, Speaker. The Thames Valley District School Board Supervisor, Paul Boniferro, was appointed in April 2025 and has so far billed the government a total of almost $240,000, Speaker. And what has the public got from this investment in supervising the Thames Valley District School Board? We saw the waits for psychological assessments, the wait lists for students who have been referred to a psychologist, who need an assessment in order to access special education supports. We saw those wait times more than double under a supervisor compared to a year ago. And the supervisor's response to the doubling of the wait times was not to do something to try to, get more assessments done to ensure that students were getting the psychological assessments they needed. What the supervisor did was change the criteria as to who gets added to the wait list. And then magically, Speaker, this artificially reduces the number of students on the wait times because they're no longer allowed to be added to the wait list for a psychological assessment. And that has forced parents to have to pay out of pocket for private assessments as they look at waits of, a year or more. And they have to do that in order to be eligible for the special education supports that are available. We also heard from the Special Education Advisory Committee Chair Alison Morse for the Thames Valley District School Board that the supervisor has increased secrecy about board activities. It has led to a complete loss of transparency, and it has led to decisions being made without public scrutiny. And the special educator, or the SEAC chair, Alison Morse, says trustees play a vital role in school board by providing accountability and transparency through public meetings. Trustees are democratically elected and serve at the will of the local community. And since the appointment of the provincial supervisor, Alison Morse notes that there has been a significant reduction in community engagement and a real loss of transparency about what's happening at the school board. And none of this, Speaker, is good for students. None of it is good for families, and none of it is good for the communities in which schools function. I want to spend a little bit of time, Speaker, on two schedules of the bills that are part of my responsibilities as Shadow Minister for colleges and universities. And the first schedule I want to talk about is Schedule 4, the changes to the Ontario College of Teachers Act. So what this schedule does is it allows the government to make changes to teacher education programs that override the institutions at which these programs are located. The changes can override that institution's own academic governance, and it says that these changes can address areas such as areas of study, delivery, practical experience, timing, and really anything else that the government would like to do in teacher education. And certainly we know that there is a need for more qualified teachers in Ontario. We have heard that there are over 70,000 Ontario certified teachers who are currently not teaching, and that there is a 30% increase in teacher retirements expected over the next 5 years. So we do have to address workforce issues around teachers. But instead of investing in improving teaching and learning conditions, which would be, a way to retain teachers, to make sure that young people who train to be teachers actually go into the profession, instead of doing that, what the government has proposed in this bill are changes to allow the ministry and the government to determine the content of teacher training programs. And this is a very troubling precedent, Speaker, when the government is permitted to overrule university governance processes, faculty senates, academic councils, other governance structures that have been established through legislation, I may add, in universities across the province, and keeping the government out of determining the content of programs like teacher education programs has been important to ensure the academic integrity of those programs. And now, with this bill, all of this will be at risk. The second schedule that I wanted to talk about is the schedule that eliminates the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario, or HECO. That institution has been around for decades, actually, Speaker. And its mandate is to bring evidence-based research to the continued improvement of the post-secondary education system in Ontario. And it's a curious thing, maybe not so curious, that this government decided to eliminate HECO, because we have seen repeatedly that this is a government that has no interest in using research and evidence to inform policy. And in fact, this government also often makes decisions that fly in the face of good policy. So it is indeed unfortunate that this government is getting rid of the one institution that could be relied on to generate very thoughtful research and policy recommendations to guide government decision-making. I want to now talk about one of the other changes in the bill that deals with attendance. And the minister has noted that there are, only 40% of students in Ontario are attending school regularly, and so there is an issue because kids can't be successful if they are not in the classroom. But to get back to the importance of research and evidence, Speaker, you have to understand why kids are not in the classroom in order to take effective measures to keep them in the classroom. And I want to quote a very thoughtful op-ed by Iris Gorfinkel, who is a family physician from Toronto. And she agrees that missing school is a pediatric crisis. Chronic absenteeism strongly predicts worse emotional skills, mental illness, and economic difficulties. However, she goes on to say that if Ontario responds to this crisis with marks, because that's what this government has proposed with this bill, that students will be given marks for attendance, but if Ontario responds with marks and exams instead of treatment and support, absenteeism will worsen. This bill does nothing to address the real issues that are keeping students away from school, mental health struggles, the lack of community supports. To go back to the Thames Valley District School Board and the example of the waitlist for psychological assessments, not only are there very limited supports in the community with long waitlists to access programs, but even within the school system, kids are waiting years or more in order to get the assessment that they need to qualify for special education programs. So this bill, Speaker, to wrap up, really does nothing to address the chronic underfunding of public education, the issues that so many families and students are encountering on a daily basis. And the government took this bill through a very short committee process, 1 day of public hearings, 5 hours, just 5 hours for the public to appear before the committee or to submit written proposals. But there were many people in Ontario who care about public education and who took the opportunity to provide written submissions to the government. More than 100 written submissions were received. The vast majority of them were strongly opposed to the bill. It is worrisome that the minister stated during the committee process that there's not going to be a single penny more given to school boards to cover the new layers of bureaucracy that he has created, the new CEO and the new CEDO who has teacher qualifications, who will be working with the CEO. There were no changes made to address some of the recommendations that came forward during the committee process. No changes to help vulnerable students. No changes to address the fact that the other thing that this bill does is take accountability away from the government. 57 clauses to protect the minister, the cabinet against legal cases. Only one clause in the bill that addresses student achievement. This is a pattern that we have seen with this government to build in legal wording that would remove them from liability over the changes that they are making, and it is a reason, one of the many reasons, that we absolutely cannot support this bill. Thank you.
Time for questions and answers. Questions? I'll go to the member from York Southwestern.
Speaker, last week I was at the social policy here, and I know some of the members were here as well. And we heard from Mr. Anwar Knight, who represents an organization called Holding Parents Accountable. And we've heard some of the horrendous stories of what's happening in schools. Mr. Anwar Knight's son was beaten at a school. You know, I'm a parent and I have 2 daughters, and before running, I spent the last 7 years taking my 2 daughters to school every single day. And you know, their safety is paramount for me personally. So what Mr. Anwar described was that his son was beaten and there was no accountability within the school board. But then he even told us a sadder story that was really sad. And what he said was, there was a young girl that was sexually assaulted at a school, and her parents, both her parents were teachers, but they were not able to notify the authorities or notify the school board because they were afraid of repercussion. So the grandmother had to go call the cops and had to go to the school board. Now, what I want to ask the member is...
I recognize the member from London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. There is no question that we are seeing a significant increase of violence in schools across the province. But the reason for that increase in violence is the lack of funding that the province is providing to schools. We have if you want kids to be safe in classrooms, you need to provide the personnel, the caring adults in the school who will be there to support the students. And hear about the chronic shortage of EAs, the chronic shortage of ECEs, and other school board personnel.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Niagara Falls.
Well, thank you very much, and I really enjoyed your presentation, particularly when you started to talk about then Premier Mike Harris, who attacked schools and teachers, closed schools, that upset the unions that represented those teachers to a point that they had days of actions all across Ontario. But the one that was really big was in Hamilton, where 100,000 people turned up, which I attended, by the way. I'm showing my age a little bit, but with my sister. Do you believe that this bill is worse than the Harris attack on education?
Again, as the member.
Thank you to my colleague for that question. I'm not sure if it's worse. Certainly it is equally bad, and it really continues the work that was started under Mike Harris to really dismantle school board governance and attack the role of locally elected school board trustees in this province. And school boards are the oldest form of governance in Ontario. They predate the Legislative Assembly because people recognize the importance of having locally elected representatives who could advocate for students, who could make sure that schools were providing the kinds of supports that students need to be successful.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Don Valley East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very intently to the remarks that were delivered by the member from London West. And, of course, I also listened to the concerns raised by the member from York Southwestern. And I wanted to ask if this bill is not the solution to the safety concerns that the member has raised, what would be a superior approach to improving the crisis in our schools?
London West.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the question from the third party, because to go back to some of the comments I made in my remarks, there has been a legacy of chronic underfunding of public education under this government. We need to invest in our schools. More than $6 billion has been cut from public education budgets for K-12 education under the Conservatives, and those cuts have consequences, and we are seeing those consequences every day in the number of special education students who are excluded from school because the EAs aren't available to support those kids in the classroom. So investing in public education would be an enormous help.
Questions? I recognize the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member from London West for her presentation this evening. Obviously coming from the particular neck of woods that the member represents, I would make a couple of points. Number one, when she was the trustee at the Thames Valley District School Board, I think it's acknowledged that she did a great job and represented her constituents very well. That being said, since her time here, too bad she left. Glad she's here serving. At the same time, I think supervision of some kind was needed. You may not like what happened, but at the end of the day, the Thames Valley District School Board needed some change. Ineffective management, bad management. Does she agree at the very least that Bill Tucker, the current Director of Education, interim, filling in, has done a good job to bringing back respect and integrity to the Thames Valley District?
I recognize the member from London West.
Thank you very much. There is a constant narrative that we hear from this government that the Thames Valley District School Board needed to be put under supervision. But I can tell the minister, and he certainly should be aware of this, that the decision to send senior administrators to the Rogers Centre for a staff retreat was made by the Director of Education. The trustees had absolutely nothing to do with it. The trustees in the board are looking at what kinds of support students need to be successful. They are looking at advocating to the Minister of Education to get the mandatory costs that they have to provide to staff to have that covered by the government. They are doing the work on behalf of students.
Questions? I recognize the member from Ottawa Centre.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from London West. You know, we learned at committee that there are some 21,000 children that are excluded from school entirely. 1 in 4 students with disabilities can't attend for full days or full weeks. The core education funding is being unaddressed here, the shortfall of $850 million. And the minister's response in his answer to disabled students being, left out of school is an exemption from the attendance requirements. So I just wonder, if my colleague could respond.
Question, please.
Is there anything in this bill that you see where the resources, there are resources that would allow for students to actually attend school?
And as the member from London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for the question. There's absolutely nothing in this bill that will help enable students with special education needs to get back into the classrooms where they belong, where they have a right to be able to learn. Because this government has, made it such that schools cannot provide the supports that those students with special education needs require because, again, they are not funded to the level that they need to provide those supports. Thank you.
Question. I recognize the member from Don Valley East.
As many people know and likely share my concern, there is an epidemic of mental health challenges across society, and that seems to be amplified in our schools. Do you see anything in this legislation that would help to address the crisis of mental health in our schools?
Thank you, Speaker. There's absolutely nothing in this legislation that is going to address the crisis of student mental health. There is nothing in this legislation that is going to address the needs of students who have special learning needs and are excluded from school because the supports aren't available for them in the classroom. What there is in this bill is legal wording to protect the government from lawsuits from
please.
parents who are want to make sure that their kids get the education they deserve.